the next presentation we're going to hear from is a joint presentation. So I'm going to introduce Marie Faucon, from SmartFlows, and Emeric Dussart, who is the Vice President, Technology and Innovation, Aéroports de Montréal. So Marie is the marketing manager for SmartFlows, and we're going to see the presentation in two halves. Firstly, from SmartFlows perspective, and then in terms of implementation from Aéroports de Montréal. So over to you, Marie.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the introduction. So yes, I'll start presenting basically SmartFlows passenger flow monitoring solution in a nutshell, and then I'll leave Emeric to present the implementation and the benefits for Aéroports de Montréal, which is one of our historical and great clients. Just a quick introduction about SmartFlows, if I can move to the next slide, sorry, there it is. So SmartFlows is a system that transforms raw undervalued data, such as Wi-Fi, beacon, airport maps, etc., into actionable data, in insights that then operators, airports, can use to make the best decision for their airport. SmartFlows has been in business 10 years now, and its expertise focuses on transit places like airports and train stations. The software is in use in various airports of the world under long-term contracts, among which Hong Kong International Airport, Nice Airport, Geneva, Riyadh Airport, and Montreal Airport, as we were just saying. SmartFlows software suite provides live and historical data, as well as passenger flow forecasts. Our clients use the solution to support the daily life, the operational life in the terminals, based on quantified real-time live data. And these days, obviously, they use the densities, for example, to manage the social distancing measurements all over the airport in each and every area of the airport. And they can also, for example, manage the level of service of the airport and also of the airlines, the ground handlers, etc. Forecast resources are also used to save budget, as much as, of course, to prevent crowds from happening. On the long term, the data also supports planning for better design by adapting the distribution of flows in the terminals. And obviously, again, during this crowded situation with the COVID, it was very useful to make arrangements to prevent crowds formation. The data also supports increasing revenues by providing the best retail and service offer for each type of passengers. And of course, it improves the passenger experience at the same time. And eventually, the data can be directly shared with the passengers themselves to empower them and give them the best information to adapt their journey throughout the terminals. How does it work? Well, the software suite collects radio signals from Wi-Fi mainly, but it can also be from Bluetooth, and transform them into statistics that show the behavior of all the passengers all over the terminals. Area per area, how many passengers are present, for how long, and who are they? Meaning, are they departing, arriving, transferring, and on which flights? Of course, not 100% of passengers have their Wi-Fi on, and some passengers may carry no phone or multiple phones, but it's the whole point of the software suite to provide the number of actual people in an area inferred from the number of devices that is identified. The software has several patented algorithms that clean the data to keep only the passengers and get rid of printers, for example. To match them to the right flight, and then to weigh it back to 100% of passengers. The data produced by these algorithms have always been validated by our clients as representative of the real behaviors of passengers in the terminals. So SmartFlows is a plug-and-play solution that provides the monitoring of paths from curb to gate all over the airport. A ready-to-use web application that provides the needed passenger flow information at the right time to various users among the organization, immediately after a simple and quick configuration. The solution is compliant with the strictest international privacy regulation, including the European GDPR. And the solution has its own 3 times patented location engine that uses trilateration methods to guarantee an excellent correlation to reality. So now I'll let Aymeric share the context of our collaboration and how Aéroports de Montréal leverages the passenger flow data.
Thank you, Marie. So today, indeed, it is as an airport user that I'm presenting the SmartFlow solution. Actually, we implemented this solution in 2016, and I'll just go to the next slide. And actually, before that, I'm just explaining my role. And so I'm the head of the technology function at Aéroports de Montréal. So my job is to manage the full application portfolio and technologies being deployed at the airport and operated today. So we, as I was mentioning, we deployed this technology initially in 2016. So we had different business objectives for that product. First and probably foremost, we're looking to find a way, an additional tool, I would say, to measure the performance of the passenger flows at the airport. We had specific solution in place at certain areas like security checkpoint or arrivals, but we wanted to have something that was more holistic, that could encompass the full terminal. We were also looking for a quick way to display wait times at the airport. At the time, there were long lines at the customs in Montreal, and those lines actually were processing pretty fast, but we wanted to demonstrate to the passenger that they were not about to wait half an hour, but only 15 minutes. So we also used that technology to make sure actually that to have an easy way to display the wait times at arrivals. And finally, as a manager of the technology function, we were trying to find a way to make a better usage of the Wi-Fi infrastructure. So it's very significant in our terminal. So there's lots of access points, lots of hardware, being that we invest in to provide Wi-Fi technology for the passenger and for the airport operations. But if we could have an additional way, to leverage to get advantage of that technology, it would be a great plus for us. So with that in mind, we went forward with the solution, and initially, actually, we deployed those specific use cases I've just mentioned, but with our own dashboard. Actually, and as you can see on the screen, we developed our own presentation screens depending on the usage that we had at the airport. And actually, very quickly, we arrived to very good results, and that actually responded well to the business requirements that we had over the years. And I'll go to the next slide, Marie. What's interesting is that we developed multiple new business cases for the solution. The first one is operational optimization. So we use the solution to measure the performance of most of the key processes of the airport. So and from a full curb to gate perspective, just as you mentioned. So that's very key here, but because we were able to measure the impact of a specific process on another one. For example, the time spent at check-in, what would be the impact on the time spent in the duty-free store? Time spent at security, same thing. What's the impact on the commercial side of things? So we were able to see what was the real impact of having operations that were too long at certain areas on the commercial aspects of the rest of the journey of the airport. Which brings me to my other point, the retail and advertising optimization. That's probably where we developed the solution the most afterwards. We definitely looked very much at the key commercial areas at the terminal to see how long were the passengers spending in those areas, spending time in those areas. What was the impact of a delay in certain key areas of the process? What was the difference between the flight profiles? We learned that some passengers of certain flights were spending much more time in duty-free area versus other flights, and it allowed us to re-question, some certainties we have, and maybe we didn't have that much intelligence around those aspects, and it allowed us to gain a lot in there. Another aspect in the commercial area is the advertising as well. So there's a lot of advertising space, that we sell at the airport. So it allowed us to build stronger business cases for those that wanted to buy some advertising space at the airport, because we were able to demonstrate that there was a certain number of people at a certain time of the day in the terminal building in front of a signage or in front of a billboard, for example. Another use case, and that's really probably one of my personal favorites, really the per flight performance review, because we get the system being connected to the ODB. So when a user shuts down its cell phone at a specific gate, we're able to connect it to a specific flight number. So we get profiles per flight for all the passengers at the airport. So we really know what is the full profile of a specific flight from curb to gate. So what is this time spent at check-in, the time spent at security, time spent in the commercial areas of the airport. And it allows us to know, to evaluate the performance of the check-in time for those specific flights, and to generate some interesting profiles from an operational but also from a commercial standpoint. And this allows us to better prepare for the visit of the passenger in the near future. We know in advance what's going to be, do they arrive 3 hours in advance, 2 hours in advance? So we know much better now those kind of behavior patterns that we have on a per flight basis. And now a brand new use case actually that emerged recently, social distancing. We're still at 10 or below 10% of traffic, so it's not a tool that we're still using a lot, but when traffic will be returning, is going to be part of the tool set that we're going to be using to prepare for the return of the normal traffic. So we're able to know exactly right now on different areas of the terminal which areas are too crowded or not crowded. So you'll see on the next slide, actually, we have a specific dashboard now that allows us to know what's the density in specific areas of the terminal. So for example, carousels, check-in counters, you see here, it's all green because the terminal is very little crowded right now, but we did some tests already, and we know that when there's too much concentration of people in certain areas, it flips to red or to yellow, depending on the amount of people. And the great thing is that there's also a predictive tool that is present there. So based on previous patterns, previous systems, there's algorithms there that give us a predictive pattern of what we should be expecting in the near future in terms of a crowding and social distancing. So that's an additional tool, and we as we prepare for the return of traffic to its normal levels, we know we'll have that at hand, to better plan the social distancing aspects in the terminal. So briefly, how is it evolving now? Well, the great thing about the tool is that it's now fully democratized throughout the organizations. Most of the business units at the airport used it. So commercial operations, real estate management as well. They use it to better manage the assets. Which areas need more sanitization? Which area needs to be better taken care of, depending on the volume of passengers that went through it. So it's really spread out throughout the organization, the usage that we have today. And we're looking at introducing more automation, making sure that eventually this tool is connected to others via API. So that's the future perspective that we have for its evolution. And as we're mentioning, our focus right now is really much on making optimal parameterization of the tool to make sure there's going to be a very useful tool to return to normal traffic levels at the airport. So this is what I had for you today in terms of smart flows usage at the airport. Thank you.
Marie, if we could start with you, because as I said earlier, your presentation on smart flows generated a few questions. I know you talked about how it was a GDPR compliant platform, but the questions I'm being asked are, how do passengers consent for their data to be harvested?
Okay, so we must start with reminding the auditors that the data that we collect and that we use are only the MAC address of the devices, okay, which is not exactly considered as a personal data. That's a first point according to different legislation. That's the first point. The second point is that when the MAC address reaches Smart Flows software, it's immediately anonymized in a way that nobody can ever go back to the personal data. So this is done with simple information of the airport on either their website and most of the time physical messages in the airport itself. And of course, every passenger who would want his MAC address not to be monitored can send the MAC address number to the airport to say, I do not want my MAC address to be registered and to be monitored.
Oh, perfect. And then I guess what also then interested people was in the presentation you talked about being able to differentiate people by flight. And the question is, well, if we have anonymized MAC address data, how do we know what flight they're getting?
Logical question. The way we do that is by applying a probabilistic approach that links the time at which the passenger is seen next to a gate and the distance he is seen to that specific gate. So if a passenger is seen at 12 a.m. at 12 p.m., whatever, next to a gate A1, and the AODB or the RMS tells us that at gate A1 at 12 p.m., it's a flight from Montreal to New York, then we will say that this passenger flew on a flight to New York.
And then you'll be able to use that data sort of looking backwards.
Exactly.
But as they arrive at the front door of the airport, at that point, you don't know what flight they're getting.
Exactly. So we, in no circumstance, have access to the boarding pass, the name of the passenger, his gender, etc. It's not the information we're interested about, or at least it's not the information we would be interested, but it's not information that we can deal with.
And then in the questions that were sent to me earlier, I also saw a question about the extent to which you integrate your product with other data. You know, an airport is never very short of data, but the question is how you actually turn that into useful information. And if you're operating an airport having 27 different applications, all of which deal with some specific aspects, how do you go about? I
can answer this question, but maybe Emeric would like to actually answer it, because he's been doing it for Montreal, which is integrating smart flows to the whole data landscape.
It is really depending on the use case that you have. For example, and one interesting one that I have right now is someone managing the HVAC system at the airport. He was using smart flows to identify the areas in which there was the most passengers at a certain time of the day in order to optimize the heating and air conditioning system in those areas in particular. So right now he's looking at a dashboard and adapting his asset management system manually. But eventually what we're trying to do is find a way to get the data from smart flows to that system in order to automate the process of optimizing his asset asset management process. So that's one possible use case, but there are many. I mean, depending on what kind of business usage you want to do, what kind of business benefit you're looking for. But eventually AODB is the starting point, because that's where you connect to the most of the operational data of the airport.
Basically, we leverage, and as inputs, we leverage flight data, airport maps, Wi-Fi logs. Obviously, that's even the rawest material that we leverage. And as an output, there's this web application that Emeric has been showing you, but all the data that we produce is also available through APIs that can then feed any BI tool that the airport is using, including the application for passengers, the airport application, the digital signage, the APOC for security concerns, etc.